What did you do as a teenager that you will never tell your parents? Story 1. I really didn't want to go to PE one day, but I didn't have a good reason, so I knew my dad wouldn't write me a note. So what I did instead was get a plain piece of paper and asked him to sign it because we're doing a thing in English where we try to guess the personality of a person from their signature, which he totally bought. I then went to the printer and typed out your standard sick note, stuck the signed plain paper into the printer, so when the note printed my dad's signature would appear at the bottom. I will probably tell my dad this at some point because I'm actually kind of proud of myself for pulling it off. My sister is amazing at copying other people's handwriting. She used to make some serious coins when we were in high school and got a lot of people out of school for the day. This was my high school talent. My mom taught me her signature when I was 12 because my reading class had a daily reading that needed your parents to sign for a grade, and she was just not about that. I signed all of my own paperwork from then on, even things she wouldn't have necessarily agreed with. I did the same thing, but also at some point I realized nobody at school knows, frankly cares, what my mom's signature looks like. They don't go through and do a handwriting analysis between the beginning of the year medical form and the field trip permission slip. As long as you don't sign it Mom or something, they aren't going to know. Although I did have the added insurance, I could be pretty sure if anyone ever tried to call my parents, they'd back me up and said they signed whatever it was. For me, if anything, it looked more suspicious when my mom would really sign something and I had to sign it next to hers. Our first names are pretty similar, and we have the same initial and last name, and when I was leeching my signature originally, I based it on hers, so our real signatures look very similar. My forged one was different. Story 2. My time to shine. My senior year of high school, I snuck out of the house at like 2 a.m. to get some. My parents were a little psycho and put bells on the front and back doors, in case of burglars. But they didn't put them on the laundry room door, which led to the garage. The garage had a side door in it that led outside. So obviously that was my way out. The problem with that side door is that it's a bit hard to tell when it's locked, since you can always get out, but not necessarily back in. So me being stupid and frisky, just assumed it was fine and went along my merry way. Did the deed, then when I tried to get back in, I found the door was locked. Oh crap. I tried every other possible entrance, all locked. But I had my phone and an idea so crazy it just might work. I called my mom and, in my best helpless daughter voice, cried, "Mommy, I woke up in the front yard and the door was locked. I'm so scared." She came right out and got me. I mumbled something about sleepwalking, then she made me waffles since I was so distressed. My mom still tells the story when the family gets together. I now have a reputation as a crazy sleepwalker. Got laid, lied to my mom, then she made me waffles. See, there's a trick to those you can go out but not always come back indoors. Get a pair of needle nose pliers and slide the bolty thing without actually fiddling the doorknob. Might require a bit of bending of the plate thingy that goes around the hole where the bolt goes in. Pardon my overly technical language. Screw it, just stick with the sleep and walk thing and eat the waffle things. It's less confusing than your attempt at English. Plus, you get waffles. Story 3. My mom still recalls this one day when I was unusually positive and talkative with her. It's because I was high out of my mind on Ritalin. I had a mini breakdown when I took Ritalin once and called my mom at 6 in the morning and told her how depressed I was and how anxious I was and that a lot of the problems I had were because of her and my dad. Not a proud moment. Sorry, Mom. She learned it from Dr. Teeth in the 60s. The guy from the Muppets? Maybe I was thinking of a different guy. I'm exhausted right now. The dude I'm referring to was famous for promoting LSD and had a funny nickname. He went to festivals and had come-down tents for people on bad trips. My mom let my friends all come over right after graduation. Believe it or not, she got together with the other moms for us to have a little party, complete with a few malt beverages and beer. We gave my mom all our keys. We turned up the music, we got out a table. We proceeded to play D&D all night. My mom still thinks we got drunk. It would break her heart to know the truth. To be fair, getting drunk and playing Dungeons & Dragons is one of my favorite pastimes. Whiskey and D&D definitely lead to in-game shenanigans that have nothing to do with the plot in my experience. Story 4. My parents were both out of town but left the car with keys in the kitchen. Anyway, I was 16, just learned how to drive, and this girl texted me to come pick her up and come back to my place. 10 minutes later, I'm grabbing the keys and driving across town in a car that I shouldn't be in with no license. They are never going to find that one out. I took my dad's manual car out for a ride a few weeks after he tried teaching me it, only managed to stall it once, and when I did, I seemed like a pro getting it going again. When learning to drive a manual car, the first thing you learn is how to quickly start it back up after stalling. It still amazes me how in Britain, most of our cars are manual. If you pass your test in an automatic here, you can't drive a manual. You have to do a test in a manual to drive manual, but you can drive automatic if you pass in a manual. Story 5. When I was about 15, I took half an eighth of mushrooms and maybe 8 or more quercetin pills and went downstairs to watch a movie with my parents. My parents were always fighting back then. They really hated each other, and I hated them as well, but for some reason, that night was very pleasant. We were all laughing and joking and having a genuinely good time. Meanwhile, the walls around them were breathing and the carpet was swirling beneath me. I was having trouble focusing on their faces. That would be the quercetin, but I wasn't in the least bit paranoid that they may know I was high. It was an extremely strange night. My dad and I are friends now, and we've talked about our drug use when we were younger. He was getting high in his room while I was getting high in mine, and angrily taking my weed when he caught me and smoking it himself. Apparently my mom was the one who was adamantly anti-drug. Dad just put on a show for her sake. But for some reason, I've never mentioned that night to him. Plot twist, your parents weren't even home, and you were having a conversation with a lamp and a candle. Story 6. Not me, but my cousin. His parents go away for the weekend with explicit instructions not to take the boat out. As soon as they round the corner, he's pulling the boat out of the garage. My cousin, Tim, and his friend, Eric, go to a local lake to go water skiing. Eric is pulling Tim behind the boat, and Eric starts to go in circles to make waves for Tim to jump. Eric is sitting on the edge of the boat while driving, so he can more easily look back to make sure Tim hasn't fallen. The boat hits a big wave, and Eric is tossed out of the boat. Now the boat is going in circles with Tim skiing behind it and nobody driving. It's getting closer and closer to the docks with each pass. Eventually, Tim swings wide and swims as hard as he can to get out of the water before the boat comes back around. Someone on one of the docks sees what's going on and jumps in the boat and shuts it off, just as it scrapes one of the docks. They took the boat home, had a buddy repair the scratches, and never said a word to my aunt and uncle. Story 7. I snuck out of the house with a friend while I was staying over with her to meet a group of boys. She hooked up with one of them in a truck while the rest of us, me and the other 2 guys, hung around in the desert at night trying not to notice the truck rocking back and forth. I must have been 14 or so. Never did anything like that before or since. I went with her because I was afraid she'd get in trouble with the boys by herself, so I wanted to watch over her. We got caught by her parents, who told me they were going to tell my parents. I prepared to be grounded for life. Then her dad changed his mind and told me I was a good kid, and he would let this one go. But we had better not sneak out of his house again. Needless to say, he went through this a lot with his daughter. I never told my parents and never will, and I'm 28 now. Did she ever repay the favor? No, because I never snuck out of the house to do it with boys. Oh my God, you're a real-life Barb. Story 8. A friend from high school and I snuck out with her boyfriend who could drive when I was 14, she was 15. He let her drive the car, and she crashed it. It was his dad's car, his car apparently being in the shop. I didn't really get too hurt besides some bruises, but we had to walk miles home at 3 a.m. We got home right before anyone got up. What happened with the boyfriend? He actually got beat up a bit and was bleeding from his head, so he called the police and paramedics came. We left before they came, so he just said a deer ran out and he swerved, hitting the pole. Since he wasn't under the influence or anything, police didn't see anything off about it. His dad's insurance ended up covering it somehow since he wasn't on his dad's policy. I do specifically remember his expensive watch got shattered in the accident, and my friend was really worried about that, almost as much as the car. I put a rug under a pine tree in my grandparents' front yard and boned the neighbor girl at least twice a week. Good times. The front yard? A rug? That's really classy. Story 9. I was trying to convince my dad to buy me a new computer for college. He doesn't exactly like the fact that I play video games due to the Asian Middle Eastern mentality of study till you pass away, but I'd been doing it for so long, he begrudgingly accepted it after realizing it wasn't just a phase. However, he made it clear that he would only buy a computer for the express purpose of helping me get a computer science degree. Shocker, right? Unfortunately, he wasn't tech-savvy at all, so I searched online stores until I found a laptop that I wanted to replace my old crappy one with. It was an $800 Asus gaming laptop with middle-of-the-road specs for the time. There was no way he would ever buy me a laptop that was built for the express purpose of gaming. So I used Inspect Element to replace all instances of the word gaming on the product page with the word studying, and made sure not to reload the page when showing it to him. It would change the words back into gaming. It worked, and within 1 week, I got my new studying computer. Story 10. When I was 18, I flew to Portugal to meet my boyfriend at the time, who was over there for the summer. One day, we decided, frick it, this particular city is cool, but let's go exploring. So we packed up our belongings, walked out to the edge of the city, and started hitchhiking. About a week and a half later, we passed through Portugal, Spain, and most of France, and my scumbag boyfriend decides he needs to find himself, or some BS, and dumps me in a petrol station in Castres, France. So I wind up staying with some lovely Buddhists who are on a retreat in the mountains, then hitchhike various lifts back to Spain and fly home. When I got home, my parents asked me if I got up to anything fun. I said we did some traveling by train. I'm almost 30 now, and it's still a secret. It's an interesting story, but I was really lucky it went relatively okay. I could have been one of those kids who goes missing or gets red-rummed. Story 11. I used to sneak out and do stupid stuff with my friends in the neighborhood. Not drugs or drinking, but stealing stop signs, egging a house once, laying on the golf course, and shooting the breeze. I honestly thought my folks knew about it, and that they were just of the kids will be kids mentality. I even got a ride home with the local police once or twice, but no, my parents had no clue what I was up to. I don't want to tell them, not because I worry about what they think of me, but rather they would blame themselves for not seeing it. That doesn't sound that bad, to be honest. Aside from the stop sign stealing, those all seem like fairly passive crimes, ones with few victims. Person who got egged would probably beg to differ. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video and have a wonderful day. Story 12. I trafficked large quantities of Molly, mushrooms, acid, and weed all across the U.S. to sell at music festivals. We would go on month-and-a-half-long road trips dealing with them and could make $15,000 a person each weekend. I'm not sharing that one. It's a wonder most teens make it to adulthood alive, let alone free. I can only hope in the future I make better choices. Where did you get the initial money to buy the drugs? If you made $15K in one weekend selling acid, say at $10 a tab, that is 1,500 tabs. At bulk prices of $3 to $5 a tab, that could still be $7,000. And you stocked up for multiple weekends because I assume if you did a month-long trip, you weren't coming home every week to reap. Worked summers at a potato shed, about $800 to $1,000 a week in cash. You honestly don't need as much money as most people imagine. When you're buying large enough bulk, stuff like mushrooms is only around $300 a pound. Story 13. All those times I sarcastically answered, smoke the reefer, to the question of what I was going to cut, I was actually telling the truth. My parents were incredibly surprised when I called them from jail. When they finally picked me up, I said, in my defense, "What? I literally told you several times." And my mom pauses and goes, "You got me there. Now shut the heck up." "What did you do?" "Smoked the reefer." "Dude, your sister is insane. What the heck?" "Insane? Seems more like a chunt to me." Agreed. It's one thing to mess with your younger siblings, but it's a completely different story if you actively go out of your way just to spite them. I think some petty revenge is in order, like lying about her to your parents, or red-rumming her boyfriend, or changing her Facebook status to something embarrassing. Story 13. I snuck out a few times to have alone time with a high school girlfriend, only got caught once. Modern cars are so quiet, teenagers now just don't know the struggle of trying to keep an old slant six from waking your parents. When I was in high school, I would push my truck out of the driveway and down the street so my parents couldn't hear it start up. I hear you there. Unfortunately, my truck weighed 7,000 pounds. It was uphill out of the driveway and downhill shortly after, so essentially uphill both ways. And I had a big straight piped V8, so I had to hoof it for a mile or two, usually in the dark, to my friend's house. One advantage of not having a car and being stuck with a bicycle in high school, I guess. Story 14. When I got my first cell phone, a Nexus 5, my parents kind of went nuts with the whole plugged in and turned off in the living room at night thing. Knowing them, it was probably an anti-corn measure. Unfortunately for them, my 3DS had a half-decent internet browser. Really strict parents of my friends were not allowed to go on the internet on his 3DS because of this. Don't get me wrong, he was an innocent kid, but were only allowed half an hour a day on it. I wasn't either, but my parents stupidly trusted me to both know the Wi-Fi password and not use it. How old are you? I'm 16 and my first phone was far older than a Nexus 5. Story 15. My dad knows this, Mom doesn't. My freshman year of college, I got busted for smoking pot at school. Just smoked a joint outside and went back to my room to do some homework. 20 minutes later, campus police knocked on the door. My room reeked of weed. They took my bud, all my grinders, pipes, what have you. They sent a letter home and fined me. I told my dad to keep checking the mail to make sure Mom didn't get to it. He told me just to be more careful. My girlfriend ended up dropping by my house on her way to visit me one day and grabbed the letter out of the mailbox. My mom never found out. I'm a straight-A student and it'd break her heart. Sorry, Mom. Story 16. I legit used Photoshop to change my grades on a bad report card once. They never figured it out. I used Inspect Element to change my bank account information when my mother demanded to see how much money I had and what I'd bought recently. Somehow, over the next month or two, I managed to fudge the numbers enough that she never figured it out. I don't miss having my parents spying on my finances, but I also don't miss being so financially irresponsible as I was in my teens. Better than the kid I knew whose mom asked for pictures of his stools. She was a physician and wanted to know he was eating well at college. Pretty sure all the helicopter parents can go home, now that this one exists. Story 17. I looked up naughty things on the family computer because I knew they'd blame my brother. He was a butthole and we didn't get along. So whenever he'd tick me off, I'd look up inappropriate things. I didn't even watch it, just Google some boobies so it would show on the search history. One time he ruined my school project, so I looked up some bondage and really torturous BDSM stuff. Then when my mom went through the search history, she'd find it, tell my dad, and they'd freak out on him. They never knew it was their Catholic school-attending daughter being spiteful. Story 18. I showed my bare chest to way too many guys on the internet. You could always increase that number, and then it can become more of a hobby that you're proud of and less of a dirty secret. I could consider making it a hobby. I showed my boobies to a bus full of Catholic boys. I was 17 and they were, about 12. My friends dared me to flash them, just for a second. I swear the bus almost fell over from the force of 50 prepubescent boys slamming up against the windows on the side facing me. Story 19. When I was 13, a friend of mine used to steal his mom's muscle relaxers and split them with me at school, and some of those days I would have my dad pick me up because I wasn't feeling too great. But I did indeed feel great. I had a classmate senior year who brought them to school. You could see in his eyes that he was always out of his mind. That it was me who looked at naughty things in the family computer, not my brother. So did your brother. My God, I knew the Asian stuff wasn't mine. Story 20. I wanted to go home sick from school early in 8th grade, so I put a mouthful of soap in my mouth at the end of lunch and just held it there. Went to my next class and sat down quietly. Then 5 minutes in, frantically rushed up to the front of the room and threw up in the garbage can. Got to go home early and missed the next day as well, and my parents thought I had legitimately caught a stomach virus. Story 21. That time I came home on the eve of my 17th birthday, and you said I looked different, and I said it was because I'm older now. It was because my pupils were blown out and I was on acid. Haha, I'm fine, Mom and Dad. By the way, when did we get pictures that move? When did y'all start putting GIFs up on the wall? Mom, at 12 a.m., my pupils automatically become bigger because I get a year older. Story 22. I used to intern at a radio station. One day I told my parents that I was going to go early to sit in on an editorial meeting. Instead, I took a bus an hour south to interview a felon about her experiences with solitary confinement and prison debt for a piece I was working on. They think this interview took place at the station. If they found out the truth now, they would probably get a heart attack. Story 23. My parents know I smoke weed. They have no idea how much weed, and they never will. Living at home with my parents after college, and this is exactly me. They caught me within a week and decided they'd allow it as long as it was only occasional use. My use is quite occasional in that the occasion occurs multiple times a day. Story 24. Left the country. When my dad was a teenager, he periodically hopped the border with his friends. Security was a lot less tight in those days, so you just had to wait until no one was watching and duck into the field on the other side of the road. Story 25. Go on a date with girls. Kissing girls. You know, the usual for a 16-year-old supposed Muslim girl. Yeah, I would get myself ended if I told them. Absolutely harem. Safe to say that girl was her harem bae. Halal on the streets, harem in the sheets. Story 26. I used to steal and snort my mom's painkillers, initially to try to understand why she did it, / how she experienced life. After 2 weeks, I noticed I was walking around like a zombie the way she had my whole life. I haven't touched the little devil since. Story 27. The Dean clothes on the floor were there, not only because I was a lazy snob, but because my closet was a mushroom farm. I guess your room really was so dirty it was growing mold. Story 28. The night I snuck out, stole the family truck, and drove 25 miles to lose my virginity. My dad thinks it's hilarious, but Mom will never know. Story 29. I rushed out of church and got sick with food poisoning when I was 14. Lots of people consoling me and being driven home early. I was very, very hungover. Yeah, I feel this. Story 30. I hid all letters from the school. I really was suspended like 4 to 5 times a month at least. I just pretended to go to school all those days. Story 31. I've convinced my parents that it's my medicine. My real medications are like $50 per day. I can't afford that stuff, so I seek illegal substances because they cost less. America is great. Story 32. Pleasured myself to completion onto my stepdad's pillow. I want to ask why, but then again, I don't. Do you want to know? I mean, I can tell you, but dang, I want to know, but not really. Story 33. Beat my dong like it owed me money about 15 times per day. You'll never tell your parents, but I guarantee you that they already know. Story 34. The time I found their home movie when I was looking for something to enjoy alone. So how was the FAP? Story 35. They think I only snuck out at night twice, but that's because I only got caught twice. Snuck out all the dang time. Story 36. Besides smoking, drinking, promiscuity, I lied about graduating from the equivalent junior college. I even made a fake diploma and transcript. Story 37. I grew magic mushrooms out in the open. I told her it was a science fair project. I was 13. Story 38. I sniffed paint every day after school for like 6 months straight. That explains a lot. Story 39. When I go to music festivals, I tell my mom I'm camping. Meanwhile, 3 doses later. Story 40. I violated my couch while on acid. Same, except I was sober. Story 41. Mom, I'm not falling for that trick again. Dang, 25 miles to meet your dad? Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.